Welcome to Corona Choir podcast, What Choral Folks Need to Know. And you and Dr. Miller are like celebrities in our world of choral music. So it's really fun and great that you're spending a little time with me. So thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here. For us, we are like in a little box, which are our labs, am I right? And everybody is isolated, but scientists are known to be isolated by default because you have to be so focused in order to get what you need to go. So these moments of bright light of communication with you really give us a chance to understand that there is life beyond and that what we did matter, because that's really hard to see from our vantage point. We also receive a lot of emails. We apologize to every single person that we did not respond, but we are now in hundreds. I'm sometimes reaching thousands of emails. And if I was or any other scientist was responding to their messages as diligently as they potentially could, there would be no science. So I hope your audience understand that lack of communication. So your podcast or the reports that we record are actually really wonderful way to receive the most burning questions that community has at that point, and also gives us a chance to adjust what we are working on in our research.
Right, exactly. So let me ask you this. The, the general gestalt of the report is, in my mind, positive for singing, for making music if we are using masks at a distance and doing the time exchange and making sure that there's a good air system and that we're being hygienic. That seems to be a little bit in contradiction to the sort of the second wave that's happening right now
Mm-hmm.
in society. So how would you like choral directors who've been waiting for some good news to reconcile that with the concern around this second wave?
Okay, so we never recommended more than 30 minutes of uninterrupted stay in a environment. So that already kind of limits the time in a space before people have to leave. And so if you guys check our reports, so the way we structure our advice was already accounting for um, considering really bad situation. We did not do research without thinking that there is a bad wave out there. Where what we are what this new data and new experience, horrific experience that we are in. First of all, I would say, unfortunately, the next 2 months, which are supposed to be joyful, or month and a half, will be probably the most horrific ones that we experienced in our lifetime. Um, so as Americans, sorry, I have the other backgrounds, but I would say that that wave that is over us should increase the measures that people are taking on, not just in a choral singing, but everywhere. So what I'm worried, we have looked into some marching bands and uh, live sport. And the conclusion that I reached was that band was not creating risk. It was the audience creating the risk for band. So for choral singing, at this moment, I'm thinking the same way. If you are getting there and you are doing all of the precautions, if you are on your way to the rehearsal, you might be at much higher risk in transportation or in some passages or buildings that you have to go through before you reach a place of rehearsal. So the way I'm seeing the whole thing is that we spend so much time analyzing particles and measuring, and it was so much work under with a mask, without mask, and so on, that I reached, first of all, helped me personally, right? I apply everything that I have learned in our choral singing project to my own daily life. So it goes beyond just the science. So my thoughts are really that the risk comes from other externalities that you have to do before you reach the place where you would sing. But the singing as the activity, if your masks are well fitted, and by now people are getting to know what that is, if your if you have 3-ply mask or surgical mask, or you can find those KN95s and so on. I see them now more broadly used by people. Then really the risk comes from all other activities that you do.
I found it interesting with the masks that the report said that ideally one of you know you have a good mask if it leaves a mark.
And I would add also, if you are putting them behind, I mean, if you are using your ears to to keep them tight, then your ears start hurting as well. So just as an add-on point, um,
So that's a good thing.
it gives you appreciation also for our healthcare workers, because we go and do a lecture or sing or play music for a very short period of time, and it's uncomfortable, but you are enjoying the activity that you can kind of leave it for a moment. Imagine doing that for excessive number of hours.
Yeah. Although the ability for the human creature to adapt is amazing to me. I find sometimes I have the mask on and I don't even notice. And I think, oh, I could take it off right now because it's safe, but I'm going to leave it on. And in the winter months, it kind of keeps your face warm.
I agree. And there is another benefit that I think will stay with us. And I think masks are to stay with us, because they're kind of a good idea at this time of year anyway, because you would reduce your risk of influenza. So it's just a good idea.
Yeah. I saw statistics coming out of Australia now that they're out of their flu season, and the low numbers were almost unbelievable around flu.
Yes, a lot of researchers that, including myself, that came to the table. Of course, my specialty is fluid mechanics and ventilation, but I worked for past 10 plus years on basically reduction in flu transmission. So there was a lot of debate how much of flu was transmitted versus air versus touch, just like what you have seen with corona. But corona like sped up that, because it's such a deadly, horrific disease, sped up the conversation at warp speed. We have been living that conversation in the influenza community, and now that debate is kind of resolved. So it percolated to human conscious that this is a route that we need to disrupt, and it's to stay. I honestly think once we survive this horrific thing, for whatever it's worth, our lives will be a little bit better, because some of our infrastructure will be improved, and we will be more mindful of these other things that did wreak havoc in the population, but not in our face the way corona does.
Right. So in terms of say like architecture, that as buildings are built now, even more awareness of the ability of people to remain distanced.
Um, I was actually, it will leave imprints on anything that you can imagine, am I right? Or all our children, I mean, adults and children who will become adults will never forget this. I mean, it's such a seminal moment in our lives, and the children who are growing through Corona and Zoom schools and other things that they have experienced will never forget it. So it will influence all kinds of fields, arts, am I right, architecture, but where I come from, engineering as well. So we touched upon, I teach mechanical ventilation systems to students at the University of Maryland. That's my class, and we almost every second class end up talking about ventilation and corona. And University of Maryland, I'm sure many other schools will offer dedicated classes on how to design, implement, run systems that would disrupt or reduce the risk of transmission. And that's true for buildings and also true for our transportation systems. So I think uh, if we do it right, the buses will not be the same, the airplanes will not be the same, buildings will not be the same. And I'm not so sure it will have to do with distance among people. I think we will learn how to do some more localized protection for people. So I envision, and that's where my research team works, and I'm certain there are other labs that are thinking along the same lines, of creating a whole new line of ideas and products that would be like this thing that we all recognize, or like a cell phone, some versions of masks, but that are not masks, that are basically clearing your own air in your own microenvironment. So that's on the way. It just couldn't happen in this dramatic uh, pace. And it's amazing what happened with vaccine.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about something like handshakes. So I do a lot of work in South Africa. In fact, for listeners, I'm offering a free virtual workshop called Sing Like a South African. And as I've been putting the workshop together, one of the trademarks of South African culture is the South African handshake. And I created this little video showing actually one of my singers in a South African handshaking, and it's this and this and this, and then you pull, and then you hit thumbs, and then you bring it apart. And it's a really important part of the culture. And then I'm thinking, wow, will handshakes even return? Will we as a world adopt more of how the Japanese have traditionally handled handshakes? Or do you think handshakes will come back?
I cannot be certain, but I have a feeling that handshakes will come back.
That they will?
Yes, yes, because again, I'm just thinking, maybe I'm wrong. Am I right? I'm one data point, because there are ways of really disinfecting the environment and cleaning your own hands beyond the handshakes. I think, and also if the virus is gone, or reduced to minimum, if the risk is so low, I know that our drive to kind of be close will not be extinct. I'm not certain about that, but that's my just a projection, and projections are always uh, not such a wise thing to do, except in your own scientific field.
Well, I'm glad to hear your guess. So, Doctor, tell me quickly about your own experience. Uh, Have you sung in a choir? Do you have family members who sing in choirs?
Okay, so I personally look at the music and admire and listen with the joy. I have family members
Uh-huh.
who sing in choirs. My nephew, my brother's son, am I right? I have a musicians. And I have grandmothers and my husband and my son. So I'm music lover,
In your immediate family, choral singing or instrumental?
instrumental.
Okay, so I'm wondering how much of a shoemaker's child syndrome there is. Like, for instance, I remembered when I was getting married 2 weeks out, I realized I hadn't planned any music, and I've spent my whole life planning music for people. So, when you are, do you tend to have your mom or your family member hat on? And not overthink what you're doing in your professional life, or are you like are the people in your life who make music, man, are they always hearing from you saying
That's an interesting question, right? I had to have my own family is basically my bellwether for what I'm doing, and we had even some healthy fights when I would bring the information to the table. So if if you think families basically are your sounding board that is willing to tell you that other people would think but would not politely bring that up to your face. So I have learned there, and this is how I use my family members. Sorry, guys, I love you. Um, I basically learned what would make sense to people because we have many more complicated solutions to the problem that we developed, but they would just fail so miserably. In the lab, it looks fantastic, and research assistants and undergraduate graduate students, they were all like, oh, this works. And then I would talk to family members or close friends, and they would, and I say, oh, start using this, try this. And it's not like, oh, I want to bring them the results to test them. It's just you learn something important, something new, you want to bring it to the world as soon as possible, and just flops on its face. So some of those unrealistic lab type of solutions were basically killed by my family, not intentionally. But in these kind of personal conversations, hey, can you try this? Can you please? You think you can be consistent with this, and so on? And I was like, really? No.
And I
So
guess
some of,
that,
go ahead, please.
yeah, no, that juncture is really interesting, right? Because us lay people think of science and research as, black and white. But I guess the best researchers are, of course, doing the science and doing the studies, but then have to figure out how to integrate it into real life. Otherwise, the research is useless.
Well, absolutely. And that's, I have a goosebumps from this comment. That's something that I have to fight with or present to my own scientific communities and my students and to ingrain in them, because many fantastic ideas are basically shelved because they were never tested by what I would call reality check. So this project had such a continuous, punctual, and dramatic reality checks that it made it. It made the project so much better, and the quality of work was so much better because of that required translation into the field. So I wish this is something that if I could wish for another change that is cultural and deep and ingrained for now and forever, is that the science, all aspects of science, I'm not saying there are scientific endeavors that are by nature in this translation phase, like public health, or that's the first thing that comes to mind. But there are things that are a little bit more sheltered. And if we expose all of our science to quote unquote reality check, there would be progress that would be so much faster, because a lot of people end up spending their heart and mind to think for things that eventually don't see the light of the day.
Yeah, that reminds me of that beautiful movie Awakenings with Oliver Sacks. That he just lived in this bubble, and then suddenly he crossed paths with real humans, and it was just such a gorgeous film. But that's the message, right?
That is the message. So I do think Corona has done horrific things, but I do think that it also awakened us in a way that again might have some long-term positive effect. Again, as you can hear from me, obviously, I'm like eternal optimist. I do think that our awareness and coming from the family bonds through then things that we really love. I mean, the music is a place where people really connect, and I mean, I cannot tell you how honored I felt that I could make any contribution there to give community opportunity to come together even for this limited time of period of time, and those kinds of activities will become more central. Like my son used to complain from time to time, or more often, like, I don't want to practice and so on. I want to play games. And I'm sure all parents understand this. If you don't, you are such a lucky parent. I'm giving you gold star. Um, but honestly, since Corona time, I do not. First of all, he decided, I don't know why, I don't question. If it was normal time, I would maybe question. I don't question anymore. He changed the instrument, started from zero. He's playing very complicated pieces of music by now, and does all of the practice by himself, because that's one thing that I gave up. I was not going to worry about things like that anymore. So I think people rediscovered, even at least what I have seen in my son, even how deep the love for music is, and how important music is in everyday lives, that we might forget, you know, so much time on a highway, or in, other more pressing needs and so on, or what we thought were pressing needs.
Yeah. No, and I think that there's so many silver linings. Like for instance, when I had been in rehearsals, speaking of teenage boys, I remember I was on a Zoom call and I just wanted to get off because it had been a long day and a long week and a long month and a long pandemic, and I said, "Does anybody have any other questions?" And the boy said, "I have one," and I was, "Okay, what is it?" And he said to me, "How are you doing, Mr. Fisher? How how are you doing?" And of course, because of the virtual, I would never be that close to a child, right? And 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 the last time a 13-year-old boy asked me how I was doing has been a really long time. And there he was, right there, So that it's isn't it ironic, the intimacy that has come with the distance?
Yes, because we rediscovered each other's. Again, we were distracted with all of this drama that we thought was important in our lives, but actually it wasn't. So some humanity, humility coming out of us. It was always there, just did not get a chance. I'm
Yeah,
sure that other students of yours taught those things, but had to rush to the next thing and did not get a chance to ask you.
exactly. So I want to be mindful of your time because speaking of young people, I know that school begins at 7 a.m. for in your household. But let me just quickly go through the report and you can just confirm. I just want to make sure our listeners
Sure.
have the highlights. So what has come out of this third report is either the new information or the reinforcement of things such as that with proper masks, aerosol emission is reduced between 60 and 90%.
Um, Aerosol emission with the right application was reduced around 60%. When
60%.
it comes to 70, depends on your mask efficiency. We tested other things, not just singers. So that really made a huge difference. So masks not only reduce the emission, there are several things that happen there. They reduce the emission, reduce how far you kind of blow the air in front of yourself, so that reduce how far that thing goes. So in the end, your little cloud stays with you if you have a mask more readily than we had the jokes about pig pen and things like that. And so that gives you an idea what happens with a mask. So your
Yeah.
own breath stays around you,
Yeah.
and maybe it has germs, maybe not. So forgive me for the analogy. Each of us has our own pig pen cloud. And so it not only reduces, more importantly, keeps it close to you, because you can even blow a small amount of virus. And if you blow it far and in the direction of the person that is talking to you, or, engaging you, that's already danger. So this kind of airflow blockage that maybe makes us all uncomfortable, or maybe we are all adjusted to it, is actually the key. And then that gives a chance with the limited time to kind of clear the air in between rehearsals.
Yeah.
So it's not in these statistics that the major impact is, because you could even have a mask that is not perfectly fitted, but it still has a, okay, now you and me coined a new term, pig pen effect. And it helps. So even imperfect masks help. I'm not advocating for them.
So singers produce about the same as woodwinds and brass. I know that it
Correct.
depends on consonants and vowels, intensities and
Correct.
pitch. And you particularly focused in on the soprano, right?
Yes.
Now a little drama within our profession, doctor. You know, the sopranos are always getting all the attention. It's about the sopranos, the sopranos, and sopranos. Was there any consideration to focus in on the poor altos or the
Bass.
tenors?
Yes.
Well, no, you know what? Basses, it's all about the bass. Basses and sopranos, they get all their attention. But the middle voices, was there any consideration for us guys?
Yes, and I have a great news for you. We are actually soliciting, am I right, and measuring also for the middle range. Yes, it's just we never reached that point. These other guys were more readily volunteering. I don't know. It's just a bias sample, am I right? So there was no intent to start with one or the other. We will test all ranges, and in January there will be our final report that would include the singers with all ranges. Yes,
That makes sense
so
that
it's coming.
it makes sense that the Sopranos would volunteer. They're that singer that sits in the front and they're very cooperative and you know they're diva-ish. So that makes sense. So the plexiglass, I found this very interesting because
Mhm.
I went into a recording studio with some singers and we followed safe practices, best practices as much as we could. Nobody got sick, thank God, but we were relying on plexiglass. And your report has concern about there being acclimation or gathering of potentially of the virus on that plexiglass.
So the plexiglass could, you can imagine that it could block airflow depending how you position it with respect to supply and exhaust diffuser, because airflow inside of the room is very complicated. So ideally you have zero impact and then you have that added layer protection, but you could also impede the airflow and create more problems than benefits. Plexiglass makes a lot of sense in that close contact like supermarkets, but so for kind of controlling the flow of the people and giving the safety perception, but in a rehearsal halls where you don't know or you did not design the position of the plexiglass with respect to your airflow, you can create dead zones where that thing accumulates by vortices of air moving around. So, and it's also huge expense. So we were kind of trying to tell people it's not such a real benefit. I mean, maybe it's good because it also kind of um, adjust your behavior.
Right.
You're not approaching each other's or something like that. But with respect to the airflow, it's not really a benefit.
And the 30 minutes, doctor, I know that it's about having at least one air exchange rate after
Yes.
that 30 minutes singing. But while the 30 minutes is going on, I have in my head that in an ideal world there is an air exchange of 3.
Yes.
Is that a good number to shoot for?
Yes, that is a good number to shoot. And that's basically number. I was again telling this yesterday to my students. Now I feel like in class. That's the number that most of these public spaces are designed for and should operate at. So it's not even something that we are stretching the systems for. It's they just need to be awakened to deliver those 3 air changes.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I would mention that I did not really advocate during the summer that readily, but now because it's so cold outside, by opening windows, there is a temperature and density differential. More air would go through those open windows because the warm air tends to escape quickly, am I right? Whatever that meant. So you can get some decent airflow coming in if you have operable windows. So that can help as well. Every little bit helps, but the baseline, and I know people would be cold, so you are not required to do that. But that an idea is just to reduce the risk, reduce the risk, reduce the risk. So um, windows in winter deliver a lot of air, so you can open them and get some improvement in ventilation or like that.
And then just with the hygiene, the hand washing,
Exactly,
not
exactly.
not coming if you're not feeling well. So for all my choir director friends, I'm going to go back to where we started. Masks at a distance at all times will make the air hygienic. Good masks, the 6x6, except the trombone 6x9. I read in your report, doctor.
Exactly, exactly. Simply because if you think about trombone, they can send that air blasting much further than any other instrument or voice technically could.
See, the low brass always have a sort of arrogance about them, Doctor Srebric. Now you're just feeding into this that they're just going to love this. They're going to say, well, yes, of course we need more space. Right. So masks at a distance at all times. The times is actually referring to the 30 minutes and then the break.
Yes.
Will make air. That's
Hmm.
that's about the air exchange. That's so important. Will make the air hygienic. Just all the good standard stuff
Correct. Correct.
of. So your colleague, Doctor, I think is it Doctor
Me,
Speed,
uh-huh.
or he was the co-chair of the study of
He
the.
was the Dr. Weaver and Dr. Speed. Shout outs to them. They're co-chairs, and Dr. Miller is my colleague at the University of Colorado.
Yes, and he said that as far as you know, there's been zero transmission during music activity when these best practices have been followed.
Correct.
But of course, he's speaking from the viewpoint of bands, and I wonder if that is true to the best of our knowledge. That in singing situations as well, when these best practices have been followed, there is no known case of transmission.
So we cannot be certain, right? So we like the community to report to us. That's one type of the emails that we like to receive because that's a validation saying, hey, we deployed this and X happened. And if transmission happened and it was traceable, we need to know that because if we find a case like that, we can figure out what really happened. Then we can focus and do additional measurements and analysis and however we deal with the situations. So please don't shy from reporting to us what happened.
What would be the best way, Doctor, for my colleagues to get information, especially information that might really specifically confirm or even challenge something in here based on real life choir singing? How would they communicate that best without further filling your email box or your colleagues?
Um, uh, uh, Dr. Speed and Dr. Weaver were phenomenal because they are fielding a lot of that stuff for us. So if you email to them, what they do, they basically combine the most frequent questions, and that's how the project was guided by them in terms of the questions. They would receive massive pouring of inquiries, and then they would kind of filter like, oh, this, we receive hundreds of this, can you answer? So that's how, for example, in that report, the plexiglass comment came in. We were not even going to investigate it ourselves because for us, it's kind of straightforward that it impedes the airflow. But we received a lot of questions, so we gave it thought, we discussed, and made the decision about the message that we could pass to people. So your questions are heard, sometimes basically combined and put forward in these reports as answers.
Well, Doctor, I just want to again thank you. I know that this is your profession, but it's also a labor of love, And I want you and Dr. Miller to be aware that from the trenches, not just in the US, but from all of the choir directors that are listening, and I'm in touch with all over the world, that your study has been the primary study that we have relied on. It's been our guide.
That makes me really honored. And we have to say again, I have goosebumps. I really, again, we are not aware of that scale, scope. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you for the community that trusted us and actually funded us. So I never seen such a rapid response. Again, I tell everybody, engineers, business school, policy, public policy, I told them we are all put to shame by the music world. You guys organized, you guys had questions, you guys were not afraid. You found experts. I mean, if I am to tell any next generation, including my own son, watch what this community has done. It's totally admirable. So it's our honor. And we appreciate what you guys are doing for all children that you train how to sing and play, for all of the wonderful performances that you deliver, and keeping the music alive through this horrible, horrible time is actually such a joy to the world. And I've seen have effect on morale, and was there when we really, really, really needed it. So that's my
Mm.
message back, Steve, because you guys are phenomenal.
Two last very quick things, and just again a little story for you to take back to your community. As I said, I have roots in South Africa, and there was a South African colleague who was aware of Corona. Obviously, the township, of course, the Black communities have been affected so deeply, and but he really didn't have the facts and the figures, and he was telling me that they would wear masks to rehearsals, but then they would get into their rehearsal hall, which has no light, no windows, and then they were making the music without the masks. And it's simply just the cycle of discrimination and racism that the facts were not getting to him. And through this podcast, I was able to keep him abreast of the reports as they've come out. And that this wonderful South African choir, I'll have to send you some MP3s of them. They changed their approach based on this study.
Thank you for your service again. That's just another evidence how phenomenally well organized and genuine and wonderful your community is. I'll pass it to my community, and we'll do our best to continue the work. And you guys keep on asking questions, and hopefully this ends very soon. But our science, our culture, our music, our buildings will be different, and I think will be different, better different.
Last thing, because you seem like you have a great sense of humor, which again is good because we tend to think of researchers as being this, and I can just tell you're very funny. I'm just curious, is because humor is very important, right? And every community has their humor. There has to be a great joke in all of this, like like a saxophonist, a trombonist, and a soprano singer walks into a lab. I don't know. Do you have any, or can you let me know when the first really great joke surfaces? Because I think we all need that.
Sure, we'll do so next time.
All right. Doctor, again, I know how busy you are and I know how many inquiries you
Thank
get.
you.
Thank you so much, and maybe we'll visit again some other time.
Thank you, Steve. Great pleasure speaking to you, and good luck to everybody. We're almost there. Take care.